Well, hello there. Today I have the pleasure of hosting Mr. William Asiko, who is the Executive Director for Grow Africa. Thank you very much for making time to be with us.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. William, what really is Grow Africa?
I think Grow Africa is best described as a platform for bringing together private sector business objectives and government public policy goals. I think what Grow Africa does is bring together the private sector with their commercial interests and trying to make a profit, with government policy for economic growth and agricultural transformation.
But so far, you've had, of course, many countries who have signed up on board to be part of Grow Africa. How is the process right now in terms of African countries that are supporting Grow Africa?
Okay, thank you. I think that today what we have done as Grow Africa is use the CADAP methodology for selecting countries. And so the countries that we're in today are also countries that have signed up to the CADAP protocol. And so we have 12 countries across Africa that we are in. Of course, the CADAP countries are 13. And we will continue to follow that. As countries sign up to CADAP, we will try to also follow up and sign up those particular countries into Grow Africa.
Now, during the talks that we've had over the sessions over the last 2 days, we've had talks of where people say infrastructure is a problem. Small-scale farmers don't really feel the impact. What do you think should be done for small-scale farmers to actually feel part of this Grow Africa?
Yeah, I think a lot has been said about small-scale farmers. The kind of work that they do, how they see themselves, the kind of challenges they face, and what solutions are available in order to change that mindset. I think that it is actually very simple. There is a combination of government policy, so government cannot run away from the responsibility to provide extension services, to provide infrastructure, and to provide route to market for small-scale farmers. That has to be stepped up, and the government must invest in that. I think from a private sector perspective, the one thing that the private sector can do, particularly private sector companies that do a lot of procurement of agricultural product, is first of all to change their choices of procurement and start looking to small-scale farmers for sources of their raw materials. Now, where those small-scale farmers either don't have the capacity, they don't have the quality, or they're subject to seasonality, private sector interests can help to ameliorate some of those challenges. And I think that is the first step that big private sector particularly wants to be involved in changing the face of agriculture in Africa. That is, I think, one of the easier ways to do it. There are a number of other ways. I think that getting small-scale farmers to organize, become part of cooperatives, become part of multi-stakeholder organizations so that they can speak with one voice, they can lobby government for certain policies with one voice. I think all those things are going to be very important as we go forward.
So far we have 10 billion in commitments, right? And over to 2015, we have at least 2.3 billion that has already been given. Do you feel these African countries or partners will actually meet the target that they set for themselves?
So I think that, there are two things that have to happen in order for, pledges, essentially what you're talking about are pledges to be converted into investment commitments. First of all, these pledges have been made on the basis that governments have made certain promises to do policy reform, to provide infrastructure, to provide frameworks for public-private partnerships. So government must come to the table with those promises. These commitments or these pledges will not be converted into investment commitments unless government comes to the table with those policy promises that they made. And I think this is the biggest challenge. Let's not forget that the private sector is interested, has commercial interests in agriculture. They look at their returns. Of course they want to do good, of course they want to be responsible in their investments, but at the end of the day, if the private sector is not making a profit, they are not going to come. And so they look at all these things. So I think it's important for us to realize that yes, the private sector will come. I think that $10 billion number demonstrates a very strong commitment from the private sector to be involved in agriculture in Africa. But the fact that only about 2.5 billion of that has been converted means that there is still work to be done in this partnership between the private sector and government.
Now, way forward, as the new executive director for Grow Africa, what's the way forward there?
Yeah, I think this is a very exciting time for Grow Africa. It's a very exciting time for agriculture in Africa. a number of things are beginning to crystallize. I think governments are beginning to realize today that the private sector has to be a part of the solution. They don't see them really just as a distant partner to create an enabling environment for. I think they see them more as a partner now in economic development. That's key. I think today all governments do recognize that. I think the second thing that is happening is that the private sector itself is seeing opportunities in agribusiness. And I think the $10 billion pledge number that you mentioned is key to that. It demonstrates that the private sector is interested in agriculture as a commercial activity. That is key. I think that the donor community as well see agriculture as the possibility of economic transformation in Africa and poverty eradication. So those three things happening together mean that Grow Africa has an opportunity as a convener and as an entity that brings people together to bring those three interests together to start getting an impact on the ground in agriculture. So looking forward, I think what I'm hearing, and I'm only a few days in the job, what I'm hearing is that people, farmers, private sector, and even some governments want to see action. I think that there has been enough talk around agriculture for a number of years. We did CADAP, we've done Malabo, and I think that what people want to see is something coming out of this. And I think that's going to be my focus on Grow Africa now.
Well, thank you very much for making time to be with us.
Thank you, Fiona.